'Cause I need to.
Welcome to Living by My Name podcast. My name is Faith, and this is a space devoted to learning how to live by faith in our everyday lives. We're not going to waste no time today. As y'all seen by the title, today we're going to be talking about giving God our yes. This is something that I have struggled with. I don't talk about things that I've never dealt with or struggled with, because then I have no experience to relate to anybody about it or talk about it. So if y'all saw the first podcast episode that I ever released, y'all know that making a podcast was not something that I was comfortable doing. It wasn't something that I was like, oh yeah, I want to make a podcast. Like, if you haven't seen the episode, go watch it, because it explains how I even began the journey of this podcast. But in order for me to be able to be talking to you right now is because I had to give God my yes. Giving God your yes can be so hard sometimes. I know it can. So I really want to talk about that today. And God led me to Exodus. We're going all the way back, Old Testament. So go with me to Exodus chapter 3. I know many of you may or may not have heard of the story of the burning bush, how God spoke to Moses. If you haven't read that story, I would recommend go reading it. It is Exodus chapter 3, and it goes over to 4, and we'll talk about that today. So God spoke to Moses through a burning bush. He told Moses that he was going to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. So before Moses was even born, God knew what Moses was going to be capable of. He knew all of the mistakes he was going to make. He knew all of the flaws that he had. He knew all of the sins he was going to commit. God knew all of this before Moses was even born, yet he still chose Moses to be a leader, to do what God has called him to do. So what's important to realize is that before you were even born, God chose you. He knew the mistakes you were going to make in this life. He knew the sins you were going to commit. He knew the path that you were going to go down, yet he still chose you. So anyways, God told Moses, look, this is what I need you to do. I need you to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. But Moses gave 4 different reasons of why he couldn't do what God was asking him to do. And that's what we're really going to dive deep into. Isn't that what we do though? When God calls us to something, we give God all these reasons of why we can't do what he's asking us to do. We're like, nah, God, I can't do that because this, and this. And we come up with this whole list of reasons. And God's like, did I ask you that? But anyways, let's get into these reasons that Moses gave. So the first thing that came out of him was insecurity and self-doubt. So let's look at verse 11. Verse 11 says, but Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? His response came from self-doubt of himself. He's like, who am I to do that? He felt insecure that he wasn't capable of doing what God was asking him to do. He doubted himself because he's like, no, I can't do that. Not me. Not me. I can't do that. I'm not the one, God. I'm not the one. Okay, so let's go to chapter 4, verse 10. And it says, but Moses pleaded with God, O Lord, I am not very good with words. I never have been, and I'm not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. This is another reason that Moses gave. And this all ties into his self-doubt and his insecurity. He wasn't good with his words. He wasn't good at speaking. He used that as an excuse. But remember what I said before in the beginning is that God is the one who created Moses. He knew what his flaws were. He still called him to this, knowing what his flaws were. So God knew that he was capable of doing what he needed him to do in spite of his flaws. The second thing that made him hesitant was his fear of rejection and failure. So let's go back to chapter 3, verse 13. But Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? Now chapter 4, verse 1. And it says, but Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say the Lord never appeared to you? This was Moses' fear of rejection. He was afraid to go to Pharaoh. He was afraid to go do this because he's like, what if they don't believe me? Who am I going to tell them that told me this? Who am I going to say you are? They're not going to believe me if I tell them God spoke to me through a burning bush to tell them to lead them out of Egypt. So Moses is insecure. He's doubting himself. He's afraid of being rejected. He's afraid of failing. He doesn't want to fail God. He's like, God, if I do this, I don't want to fail. In the last plea that Moses makes with God, he says, Lord, please send anyone else. That is chapter 4, verse 13. He's begging God at this point, like, please, God, I do not want to go. I don't feel capable of this. I feel inadequate to do what you're calling me to do. I really want you to take note that the 4 reasons that Moses gave God, after every reason that he gave, God pointed Moses' attention back to God. After the first excuse, God answered, I will be with you. After the second excuse, God says, I am who I am. After the third excuse, the Lord shows him what to do with his staff so that they will believe. After the fourth excuse, the Lord asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? It is not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you what to say. God is saying, yes, Moses, you can't do this on your own. You're going to fail if you do this on your own. You aren't capable of doing this on your own, but he says, I will be with you. And that is what makes you capable of doing it. That alone makes you capable of doing what I asked you to do. Because I'll be with you, because I will tell you what to say, because I will be with you every step of the way, you are capable. And so what we have to realize is that when God is calling us to something, he's not calling us to do it out of our own strength. He's not calling us to do something out of our own power. But if God is calling us to do something, if he's leading us this way, it is his power that is within us that is going to sustain us every step of the journey. There's many things that God can call us to that we're going to be hesitant about because we can't see what the outcome is going to be. Moses didn't know what the outcome of this was going to be. He didn't know how it was going to go. He just knew that God was calling him to do it. And that is walking by faith and not by sight. That's the whole theme of this podcast, is walking by faith and not by sight. Because even though we can't see it, we have to have faith and trust in God to believe that what he says is true. When God told Noah to build an ark because there's this huge flood coming, they had never seen a drop of rain before this point. So imagine God telling you, I need you to build this ark for this flood that's coming, but you have never seen rain a day in your life. Wouldn't you be like, God, God, what are you telling me to do? But Noah obeyed. He said, okay, God, I'm going to build this ark because you said it. Sometimes we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know what's going to happen when God tells us to do something. When God tells us to go, when God tells us to move, we don't know what's going to happen next. We have no clue of what is ahead. And that is walking by faith and not by sight. Moses had to take a step of faith in order to be able to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. He had no idea how he was going to do it. He didn't know if he was going to be able to do it successfully, but God said, I will be with you. And he had to trust in that. Not knowing anything else, he had to trust when God said, I'll be with you. He had to trust that God is who he says he is, and he is going to sustain me every step of this way. There's been so many things that I've had to do in my life that I didn't know what was going to happen next. God called me to do this. God said go. God said move, and I just had to do it. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, but you know that you serve a God who doesn't fail. You know you serve a God who works all things together for your good, so that you don't know what the outcome is, but you know that if God is calling you to do it, there is going to be a greater outcome. There is going to be a better outcome because of the God that we serve. He does all things for a purpose, and he works them all together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. Moses was called, Moses was chosen. And while Moses didn't know what was ahead, even then, he knew that God was going to work everything out for him. God kept telling him, every time he doubted, every time he was made up an excuse of why he couldn't do it, God pointed his attention back to him. Because when we lose sight of him, we start thinking about ourselves and our own abilities and our own strength and our own power. And we don't have that. We're not capable of doing the things that God needs us to do with our own strength. So God had to redirect him to the one who was giving him the strength to do these things. God had to redirect his sight. And if y'all didn't see that podcast about redirecting your vision, like redirecting your focus is important. Because when we lose sight of the one who's in control, that's when we start to doubt. That's when we start to have insecurity. That's when we start to have fear. Fear is not of God. God does not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. When we fear, when we worry, we're telling God, I don't really trust you, God. Because if we trusted God fully, 110%, there will be no fear, no worry in our hearts whatsoever. So essentially, when we're worrying about things and we're fearful about things, we're telling God, I don't trust you. After Moses made all these excuses, God started to become angry with Moses because Moses just keep making up excuses. He's like, God, please don't send me. Send anybody else but me. And so God tells him, okay, I'm going to have your brother Aaron go with you to help speak for you, because I realized that you have a hard time speaking, so I'm going to send you a helpmate. I'm going to send you somebody to help you. And sometimes God will send other people to help us along this journey to do his will. God may be telling you, I need you to leave this job and I need you to follow this career instead. But God, that career doesn't make as money as what I'm making now. But God said, the purpose that I have for your life, you can't do that in this career. I need you to go to this career. Even though, yeah, you may make more money now, but I need you to do this because this is what is going to fulfill the purpose for your life. I really want y'all to remember to not let fear and self-doubt and insecurity get in the way of your purpose, get in the way of what God is calling you to. Because fear can put a hold on a lot of people's lives. There's people who could be so much farther than they are right now if they didn't let fear get in the way. And Moses was fearful. He was. But God reassured him every single time that I will be with you. I am with you. And I'm not going to leave you. Don't worry about what you think you're capable of. Don't worry about the flaws that you have. I give you the power. I give you the strength. I am within you. All I need you to do is trust me. All I need you to do is trust that I am who I say I am. With that being said, this week, I challenge you all to write down things that you feel like maybe God is calling you to. And next to that, I want you to write down reasons why you haven't done it yet. I want you to write down your fears about it. I want you to write down your worries about it. And then after you write all that out of your fears and your worries and why you haven't done it yet, I want you to scratch all that out. Scratch all that out and write how you are going to respond to God's call. Are you going to say yes? Will you say yes to God's call? That's what I want you to think about. That's what I want you to answer. I want you to answer whether you'll say yes or not. There's a lot of things that we allow our flesh to dictate in our lives. We allow our flesh to become fearful. I want you to scratch all that out. I want you to remind yourself every single day that God is who he says he is. And God will be with me. That's what I want you to recite every day, so that your fears don't take over you, so that you can be strong in the Lord, because he is mighty and powerful and he lives within us. So that power and that might and that strength is within us. With that being said, I thank you guys so much for joining me. If there's anything specifically that you want me to talk about, please leave it in the comments. We can even do like a little Q&A one day. Leave your comments, questions, all that down below. And remember to trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. See you on the next one. Bye.
And I still pray, dear God, won't you send me a break? 'Cause I need to, won't you send me a break? 'Cause I need to.